We start off with a static TV, and it seems to be playing a show about how a woman lost her face. Turns out, someone had eaten her face off, and she says, "I wish I was dead." Someone destroys the TV, and we see the same guy preparing for something, and I doubt he's up for any good. The TV host seems to backstage and she gets attacked by this woman, and it's pretty gruesome. Then we move on to this duo, who seem to be drunk. They argue over who will drive the car, and we see a clown-like figure walking towards them. The duo decide to get something to eat, and this woman seems to notice the man in the clown costume. The drunk woman tries to tease the clown, and I don't think he took it that well. Then the clown disappears and shows up at the restaurant, and he seems to be quite the fella, isn't he? Skeleton woman knows that something's up and notifies her friend that they gotta get out of there before it's too late. Drunk woman doesn't seem to care whatsoever, and even manages to grab a selfie with the man. The clown seems pretty agitated by this point, and refuses to talk to the waiter. Then he shows them a magic track, and the blonde woman seems amused by it. "Oh look, he gave her a ring, ain't that nice?" Their food arrives, and the waiter reassures the women about their safety, and manages to kick the clown out. The duo walks back to the car and realize their front tire is flat. Seems like he left pretty good branding in the toilet. This woman dials up her sister and explains the situation they're in. We get back to the restaurant and his boss seems to be missing. Guess they'll both be missing now. Blonde woman is drunk, and the other one realizes that she has to pee and decides to go looking for a toilet. She sees a man on the street and explains the emergency. He's reluctant at first and then eventually agrees. "No thanks. Personally, I think I'd rather not." The news announces about a clown being outside, and she gets a surprise. "Hey lady, you did your job, now get out of there." She comes across a woman that seems to be mentally challenged. She manages to escape but comes face to face with the main character. They play a game of cat and mouse for a while, and ultimately she gets caught. The woman's sister starts making her way towards them, and hears about the situation on the news. She wakes up in a rather unusual spot, and the blonde woman receives the worst fate ever. The friend manages to escape, and we have another game of cat and mouse, and ultimately she gets in the leg. Art then the woman in the face, but then runs out of ammo. The sister arrives at the spot, but nobody seems to respond. She sends a text, not knowing that Art is the one who's responding. He finally ends up unaliving the woman, and Cat Lady here reports that to the man. He thinks the woman is crazy and ignores her warnings and gets knocked out by Art. Catwoman realizes her baby is gone, and friend's sister comes looking for her at the back. Turns out Art is taking good care of the baby. She begs for him to spare the child, and it seems to work. The exterminator's friend arrives and realizes that the place is locked. The sister then follows the sound of the woman's phone and starts to realize the gravity of the situation. I have no idea how they're still alive, to be honest. Happy Halloween. Sister manages to hide, and Art locks her inside. Friend over here manages to find a spare key and gets inside and discovers blood on the floor. Eventually, Art takes him out, and Sister manages to escape from the cabinet and plays run around the house. Sister tries to come up with a plan, but gets strangled. She manages to set herself free and stab Art in the leg. Exterminator seems to come to his senses, and hears a woman screaming, "Hey lady, I get that it's hard, but why would you stop there?" Art catches up to her and rips onto her skin, but ultimately gets knocked out by the exterminator. Exterminator helps the woman, and promises not to leave and calls the cops. He manages to give the full description, and realizes that the woman needs immediate treatment. Maybe that wasn't such a great idea. She gets caught and manages to escape, and gets caught again. I don't think Art will give up so easily, lady. Basically, Art drives a truck onto her and just eats her face. The cops show up and Art takes the easy way out, and turns out the sister is still alive. The bodies get sent for examination, and I think Art's far from dead. A year later, the woman seems to have made a full recovery, but her face, not so much.
Terrifier 2 starts off with the cops responding to a 911 call. We see a man crawling away from Art following right behind. The man seems to be bleeding out from his neck and can't get to speak. Art doesn't seem to be very happy about it and ultimately ends the man. Art separates the man to pieces and takes him in his bag like it's a souvenir. He goes and gets washed up, reads the newspaper, plays with his imaginary friend, unalives this guy for judging him, and then leaves. We move on to a woman designing an armored costume in her room for a Halloween party, and her brother seems to idolize Art. The woman falls asleep, and we transition into one of her fever dreams, and she seems pretty surprised to be there. Art arrives and gives all of them their surprise gifts, and Sienna doesn't seem to be very happy about it. He pulls out a drum gun and goes full ape on the crowd. Then he lights the ukulele woman on fire. She grabs a knife out the cereal box and wakes up to her room caught on fire. Mom seems understandably pissed, and Sienna tries to explain the situation to Mom, Art sees the show on the TV and is agitated when the woman mentions that Art's dead. We transition into Jonathan, and his friends seem amused by the sight of a dead rat. They invite a girl to discover their latest discovery, and I don't think she's very interested in it. Johnny feels bad about the whole ordeal and discovers Art having fun with the dead rat. Art spots him and throws the rat onto him, and a teacher finds out the aftermath. They yap during lunch and talk about the woman from the first film. Sienna starts to have PTSD from last night, and her friends calm her down. Jonathan's mom gets informed about it and seems pretty pissed off. Sienna's friend bumps into Art at the store, and she does too. She seems terrified of him, but he seems pretty helpful and entertaining. Art doesn't seem to like the way the cashier talks to him, so he talks to him in his own ways. Jonathan yaps about some conspiracies and how they're connected to Art. He also mentions how Sienna shouldn't be going to the Halloween party later tonight. Sienna's friend gets guests for trick or treat, and this guest seems a little too old. Friend refuses to give him candy, and he doesn't take it too well. Lady, maybe you should be a little polite next time. We hear about the sister from the first film's attack on the news, and it turns out all this happens on the same day. Sienna puts on her costume and prepares for the Halloween party. Then we pan onto her friend, who seems to be doing the same. She hears a thud from below and goes to investigate, and finds out that the window has been shattered. Then we see Art inside her house, and a game of cat and mouse unfolds. Art goes to town and performs every inhuman act known to man, and she seems to somehow survive that. Then he goes for round 2 and does even worse things to her. Sienna shows Mom her costume, and she seems a little disapproving at first, but eventually changes her mind. Friend's mom arrives and discovers her daughter in the worst way possible, and she still somehow happens to be alive. Then we move on to the Halloween party, where they get drunk and we get jump scared by her boyfriend. Kids come for trick or treat and get offered candy in a custom-made head, like literally. Mom apologizes to Jonathan, and they get into a fight, and he runs away. Sienna gets even more drunk and tries to get freaky with a skeleton. Mom breaks and hears a noise from the garage. She goes to investigate and finds her car vandalized. Johnny ends up in the middle of nowhere and spots Art's van. Then he sees an imaginary girl inside and runs away. Sienna gets a call from her mom about the car, and Mom thinks they're responsible for it. Shortly after, she realizes that Sienna is drunk, but Sienna calms her mom down. Mom gets to cleaning and Art blows a shotgun on her face. Sienna starts seeing an imaginary girl and starts freaking out when she appears extremely close to her. Johnny gets home and realizes that Mama is not in a good condition. Art traumatizes him and chases after him, where he then manages to catch up and sedate him. Imaginary girl calls Sienna and imitates Johnny's voice to explain how he's being kidnapped and to pull up to the carnival. They arrive at the carnival, and Sienna goes looking for her brother, and the couple sip on Zaza and get nasty while she's gone. The boyfriend steps outside to take a piss and ultimately gets his wiener sliced in half. Art texts Sienna to meet him at the Terrifier, and Johnny wakes up. The girlfriend seems injured but manages to escape and drip over the stupidest shit ever. Sienna seems lost, and the friend calls out to her. Friend gets cornered by Art and gets beaten to death. Art proceeds to eat her heart, and Sienna finds the body.
Sienna and Johnny get cornered there, and Johnny gets the chance to run, and Art seems pissed. Art goes looking for Johnny and eventually catches him, and then slices his face. Then he starts emoting and takes back shots from Sienna. Sienna seems, but Johnny talks her out of it, and she quietly looks for an exit. Johnny stays back and gets caught by Art and sliced again. Sienna comes to help and gets sliced in the process too. She manages to overpower him and give him a taste of his own medicine. She seems to have unalived Art, but turns out this man is immortal. Johnny manages to grab his pew-pew and points it at him, then he manages to land a shot on him. Sienna seems badly injured but wakes up to the scene of her mom. Turns out it's not Mama, and it seems like some brain chip to me. We get to this spot and Art throws her to a surface below, and another. Art tries to wake Johnny up and realizes that he's not responsive. We move on to Sienna, who drowns, and we seem to be back at the spot from earlier. Johnny wakes up as Art's chewing on him and calls out to his sister for help. Some supernatural jazz happens, and Sienna wakes up and manages to end Art for good. The siblings reunite, and the imaginary girl seems pissed. She takes Art's head as a souvenir and leaves with it. Then we move on to a confinement where a woman gives birth to Art's head, and that's where the film ends. I'm super excited for Terrifier 3, which seems to be releasing on the 11th of October.